Hey guys, I'm Jordy, and this is your updated boss guide to how to do Sartharion 3 Drakes the legit way. Now, just before Wrath launched, Blizzard implemented a huge HP buff to Sartharion, which would make zerging him in Phase 1 more of a challenge. So I felt that a guide covering all of the real mechanics of this fight was now warranted, so here this is. One thing to note, if you plan on doing the 2 or 1 Drake variety, zerging is still very much on the table, so refer to my last guide, which I've linked below. Alright, let's quickly mention a solid raid composition. You're going to want 3 tanks, 5 healers, and a mix of ranged and melee DPS. I'm sure you could drop healers eventually, but early on in the phase, you'll be happy you brought the extra heals. There are some damage windows that can get kind of spicy, and the extra healers can cover for some positioning mistakes if they happen. Alright, so Sartharion sits at the center of the arena, flanked by 3 Twilight Drakes, who you've chosen to not kill in order to make the fight harder by having them join the fight halfway through. Each of these Drakes being alive means that Sartharion gets an HP buff. 1 Drake increases his HP by 25%, 2 by 45%, and all 3 by 65%. This means he's going to have a whopping 12.65 million HP. While this may sound like it makes the fight harder, Sartharion's HP really isn't all that relevant other than making the zerg strat much more difficult. The lion's share of the encounter is dealing with the Drakes, whose HP remains untouched. Okay, let's get into the abilities that you'll be contending with. First, we'll discuss Sartharion himself. He does a Flame Breath that deals between 11 and 14,000 damage, and double that when modified by a buff that Shadron gives. This is the main damage ability that your tank will be contending with, and you'll want to weave cooldowns as you notice that he's casting it on you. Now, as you can see, on each side of the arena are rivers of lava. Every so often, you'll see a raid warning that announces that the lava surrounding Sartharion is churning, and large lava walls will appear on one side of the battlefield. Keep an eye out and weave between the walls, as if you're hit by these, you'll be knocked back and take some damage, as well as get a massive dot on you that will likely kill you. Keep your eyes out and don't get hit by these. There's almost no excuse that won't cause your raid to facepalm. Finally, he'll occasionally summon lava blazes. Now, these don't do all that much on their own, but if they remain untanked or killed, they can become a problem, especially if the lava walls touch them, as this will cause them to frenzy and deal a bunch of extra damage. Your off tank should do their best to pick them up and drag them into the melee to get blundered. Alright, well that's it for Sartharion. Let's talk about the Drakes really quick. All 3 Drakes have the following abilities. Shadow Breath, a cone in front of them, like most dragons, so face them away from the raid, and Shadow Fissure, which will appear on the ground and kill anyone standing in them after a few seconds. Each of them also applies a debuff to the raid that will ramp up your damage taken. Tenebron increases shadow damage, Shadron fire damage, and Vespron lowers your raid's HP by 25%. They'll also create a portal that you can right-click, similar to how it worked on Calicos, that will take you to the Twilight Realm. Now, each Twilight Drake does this, but we'll handle each one differently based on its threat to the raid. Okay, so I'm not going to get too much more into detail for these, let's just get into the walkthrough. Now, I said this before, but I need to say it again, this is just one strategy on how to deal with this fight. I'm sure there's a million little tweaks you can do here to optimize this further, but this is what I'm going to recommend to you do early on, as it worked for us and it will work for you. On pull, you're going to drag Sartharion toward the close left corner of the island. Your tank will position him parallel to the edge, where he'll be here for the rest of the fight. Make sure your camera is positioned so you can see the lava walls, and get comfy, you're going to be here for a bit. The raid should start DPSing Sartharion, but don't burn any cooldowns here. Your damage on Sartharion doesn't matter. He's not the threat here. 30 seconds in, Tenebron will land. A tank will pick him up and face him away from the raid. Keep an eye out for void zones and lava walls. I'll say this a few more times during this walkthrough. Sorry, not sorry. For Tenebron, we're going to ignore the portal and just pump damage onto him. Inside this particular portal, there's a bunch of eggs that will eventually hatch and create Twilight Whelps that will swarm the battlefield. These aren't that much of a threat, so we're just going to pick them up when they spawn and tank them, AoEing them down when it makes sense, finish off Tenebron as soon as you can. One thing to note, As each Drake dies, it will buff Sartharion with Twilight Revenge, which increases his physical damage and attack speed by 25%. So as the fight goes on, his damage will really ramp, so healers need to pay attention. Now 75 seconds into the fight, Shadron will land. Your tank will pick him up like he did with Tenebron, face him away from the raid. Shadron has all the same abilities as Tenebron, except his portal will spawn an Acolyte of Shadron inside instead of the eggs. Now this Acolyte will make Sartharion immune to damage. But fortunately, we don't really care about that because we're focused on the Drakes, so we're just going to ignore the second portal and keep pumping Shadron. At this point, as he lands, pop Bloodlust and take him out as fast as you can, because in 45 seconds, or at 2 minutes into the fight, you're going to be met with the third Drake, Vesperon. Now Vesperon has the same abilities as his brother, except in his portal, he'll spawn an Acolyte of Vesperon, which causes a damage reflect debuff on everyone in the raid. You're going to want to heal through this. It's doable, but if you're DPS and you see yourself getting low, stop doing damage so that you can get topped off. This is where you'll want to save your health stone, pop any raid damage mitigation cooldowns like Divine Sack, etc. Just focus on surviving. You'll see the portals, but just ignore them and burn Vesperon as fast as you can. Now with Vesperon dead, you're going to want to send a group of tanks, healers, and DPS down into the portal to take out both the Acolytes of Vesperon and Shadron. After the Acolytes are down, take the portal back up and everyone can turn their attention to Sartharion. Also know that when the Acolytes die, the Twilight Zone just closes and everybody's sent back to the regular realm, so make sure that someone's calling it so that you can time it just in case a lava wall is spawning right on top of you and it doesn't run the whole raid over. This has happened to us and it's not fun. Once the Acolytes are dead, you can finally turn your attention back to Sartharion and finish him off. Awesome job, you just completed the biggest challenge Phase 1 of Wrath has to offer. Alright, let's talk about some tank tips. For your Sartharion tank, it's critical that you communicate when you don't have a cooldown when he's casting a breath, so that your healers can provide you with some sort of mitigation cooldown. Especially as the Drakes die, you'll be taking a lot of damage, so be ready to get chunked. For the Drake tank, it's really important to quickly position the Drakes so that they don't breathe on the raid. It will cause a wipe. And make sure, as you take the portal to go down and take out the Acolytes, you're the first one in, followed by the healers. The Acolytes will quickly aggro on people, so pick them up. And for the Fiery Blaze tank, it's super important to keep the blazes out of the firewalls. When they frenzy, they really ramp up their damage, so do your best to avoid them getting hit by it. For the healers, let's talk about where the damage windows really start to happen. As Vesperon's Reflect buff goes up, the entire raid is going to take a ton of damage. Use cooldowns to keep your tanks up and work hard to top up your DPS. Disc Priest's pre-shielding helps a bunch here, as well as things like Divine Sack. If you get threat on a blaze and no tank is nearby, try running toward the melee so they can grab it off of you. Getting hit over and over by these can really suck, so do your best to get them off of you. And for your DPS, avoid void zones and flame walls. This goes for everyone, but please don't die to very avoidable things because it will really put you behind on DPS and things will start stacking up. And remember, you should save your big cooldowns for the second Drake, Shadron. Don't burn things too early, as the Drakes are the real threat and it can lead to a wipe if they don't die fast enough. Alright, well that's it for Sartharion 3 Drakes. This is definitely the most fun encounter in Phase 1, and I can't wait for everyone to get to tackle this challenge once the raid's open. I want to give a shout out to Baron and Foji for their footage I used in this video. I had my own, but it disappeared between us doing it and now, so big F there. Thanks guys. Let me know in the comments if you've got any tips or strategies that I missed. If you enjoyed this guide, remember to like and subscribe. It helps me a ton as I work to grow the channel. I'll have boss guides for all of Wrath of the Lich King raids, as well as hard mode achievements and much more. I've also already released Heroic Dungeon achievement guides for each of the dungeons, so check those out. I'm also going full-time streamer. Holy moly, that's crazy to say. Come by and say hi at twitch.tv/Jordy. I'll be there leveling and raiding a lot over the next couple months. Okay, that's it for me. Enjoy Wrath launch, and see you in the next one.